Welcome, everybody. Can you hear the cryings in your soul? There's more than one. It's up to you to choose who you feed tonight.
The man sitting across the table from me poured his tea in a cup. An orderly comes by and hands the man a cup of pills and said, "Okay, Walter, here are your meds for the day. Make sure to take all of them." And he proceeded to walk away. With a shaky hand, he empties the contents of the cup onto his palm. I noticed an assortment of pills, mostly in muted colors, except for one bright blue gel capsule that stood out from the rest. He popped the mass of pills into his mouth and washed it down with his tea. In a few seconds, he reclined in his seat and started to close his eyes. His hands would grow steady on the armrests, his breathing would begin to slow, and I'd notice him drift off to a deep sleep. I noticed he started to have this warm smile across his face, which was so infectious that I could not help but start smiling as well. I said to myself that I should ask him what it was he was dreaming of when he wakes up. So as he fell asleep, I decided to take my leave and come back in about an hour to check up on him. I was getting close to about an hour, so I decided to check back in when I noticed he wasn't in his chair. I thought to myself, maybe he got up early and decided to walk around. Then suddenly, I heard a splash, followed by a scream. Then there he was, inside the pool, struggling and gasping for air. I rushed to the pool and dove in to save him. I dragged him out as he coughed and spat water out of his lungs. I rubbed his back to help him and said, "It's all right. You're all right. Everything is okay." I started to see his breathing go back to normal, and he started to calm down. A crowd already formed around us, and I quickly told them that everything was okay, and that I would take care of Walter and see him to the infirmary. I asked him what happened, and he said the last thing he remembered was falling asleep and having a dream. Then the next thing he knew, he was drowning in the pool. As we got to talking, he explained that his dreams would always take him back to the time when his lovely wife and two beautiful children went to have a picnic by the lake. His wife would get her guitar and start playing and singing this wonderfully serene melody. His children would go near the lake and play around near the water, splashing each other as they laughed. He would then find himself start grilling on a barbecue. Mouth-watering fumes would waft from the grill and drift along the picnic site. It was just the loveliest time. They would spend half the day just enjoying the serene lakeside view and landscape. And in the late afternoon, the whole family would go into the lake for some swimming. The children would go ahead and jump into the lake first, followed by his wife, and finally he'd take off his shoes and dive into the cold, refreshing lake. They would swim further and further until they'd reach the center and start to float a bit, when suddenly, one of the kids would be pulled underwater. Both him and his wife would panic and start calling out to him, "Josh, Josh." They'd swim towards Wendy when, just as suddenly, Wendy gets dragged down as well. Struggling, Wendy tries to stay above water, but the force was just too much and it drags her down into the depths. His wife, who was near their children at that time, went underwater to try to rescue their kids. He ducked underwater to try and see what was happening, but all he could see was a cold, dark mass that was the depths of the lake. When he came up for a breath, he found out that he was the only one left. He had lost sight of his whole family. He'd stare at the darkness beneath him, then out of the depths, he sees hands reach out to grab him. He'd struggle and try to break free, but the hands bound his hands and feet together as they dragged him deeper and deeper into the water. he starts hearing voices say, "Help me. Dad, help me. Walter, something's pulling me down. Join us." After that last line, he'd find himself near a body of water, or nearly drowning. I paused at his question and my eyes drifted to the pool. I started to think of my wife that passed away. It was still fresh enough in my memory that I remembered how it all happened. I shook myself out of that thought and looked back at Walter when he was staring at the ground when he suddenly said, "Have you lost somebody?" I saw his face inches from mine, his eyes expressionless and his mouth drawn to a thin line. His breathing slowed and he spoke. "You have lost someone, haven't you?" A weird, sinister tone starting to come up in his voice. "Finally, I've found one." His voice so ecstatic with pleasure that was so different from the man I met just a few minutes ago. I started to ease back when his arms shot out and grabbed me by the neck. He pinned me down with some ungodly strength that I didn't know he had. I tried to break free, but his knees pinned me down and he sat on my chest. The next thing I knew, he had a blue pill in his hand. The same blue pill I saw he drank this morning. I have waited so long to finally break free of this curse. He laughed from the top of his lungs. I was about to say something when he jabbed his hand down my throat, force-feeding me the pill. He pulled out his hand and clammed my mouth shut as I struggled to not swallow. However, the lack of air started to get to me, and I involuntarily swallowed the pill and then started to see my vision begin to blur. Slowly, faces turned to shapes. Shapes turned into blobs of color, and the next thing I knew, I was out. I woke to the sound of a mallet hitting a table, a repetitive thud echoing in my ears as I slowly came to. I looked around and I was in my apartment. I found myself sitting on the couch with a beer in my hand and the TV in front of me. I saw my wife, my dead wife, as she was the night of her death, in the kitchen, making dinner. I looked over and saw her lips moving, but I couldn't hear any of the words coming out of her mouth. I tried to draw closer. Then suddenly her eyes darted in my direction. Her gaze was so intense that I felt as though she could see right through my fear. Holding the hammer in one hand, the sound of her red heels echoed as she came towards me. I started to stumble back. "Why are you running away, honey? Are you gonna hit me again? Huh? Are you?" She walked up until she was standing right in front of me. She swung her hammer and hit the wall behind me as I dodged to the right. I frantically crawled out of the way, trying to escape. She would swing wildly with her hammer, hitting everything that came between me and her. I ducked out for most of the swings, but sadly, I soon found myself backed up into a corner. She towered over me with her menacing presence and brought her hammer up into the air, getting ready to kill me. I have to get out of here, I thought to myself. I have to wake up. She's gonna kill me. At the last minute, I found the cord to the lamp and yanked it hard. The lamp fell and hit her on the head, knocking her unconscious. The lamp smashed and the scattered paper started to catch on fire. I didn't think and I just made a run for it. I ran out into the cold, rainy evening and then I woke up in the afternoon surrounded by a crowd of people. I looked around to see if my wife was anywhere around me. I let out a sigh of relief as they covered me with blankets and tried to help me up. We walked back inside, and as they sat me down, I found a blue pill in my hand, and I heard a voice say, "I'll see you again tonight." Thank you everybody for watching this week's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And for this week's question, how far would you go to live? If a ghost haunts you, what would you do to stay away from him? To get away from him or her or it, you know? And if you would like to support this channel, please click the like and subscribe button down below. And hopefully we will see you every week. Okay, bye!